Hi, Clermont. I'm Alison Strange, and I'm here to talk to you today about the fiscal year 2026 millage rate and the budget. So let's get into the meat and potatoes of where council is right now and what we're doing this coming week. Today is July 26th. It's a Saturday, and I'm getting ready for Tuesday's meeting, which will be at 3 p.m. at Clermont City Hall. At that meeting, we're going to discuss several things, including what will be the maximum millage rate that we would assess the taxpayers for fiscal year 2026. Now, to be clear, we will not adopt the final budget until September. When we do that, we will adopt the final millage rate. But Tuesday's meeting is important because it will set the ceiling at which the millage can be set. What I don't want to do is go into Tuesday and say we are afraid of what might happen in the future and be too conservative on the potential millage rate. So this video is intended to empower you and anyone else who might be watching to see how we can go even lower than the rollback rate. Now, last year I did a video on what is a rollback rate and what is the millage. That's on my YouTube channel, Alison Strange for Clermont City Council, Seat 1. And I encourage you to check that out if you don't know what these terms mean. It's a simple video, and I go through several examples for fiscal year 2025 so that you can see that. I'll also preface this video by sharing with you that my philosophy is that we never should have raised the millage from 4.2 in 2022. It's because of that raising that I actually ran for this seat. I think it was a mistake then, and I think it's a mistake now to presume that we can't fix the problems that were created by the raising of that millage. What's exciting is that because that millage was raised, we accidentally saved too much money, and we have money that we need to spend. What do I mean by that? Florida law does not allow cities to collect taxes against taxpayers unless there's a plan for those taxes. In our case, we as the citizens were told that we had to raise the millage from 4.2 to 5.06 because we needed to pay for essential services like police and fire. This was not true. What we did instead was we saved those funds and they went into our reserve savings account. Now, to you and I, that sounds great. If that was my money, I would just put it in a long-term savings and let it earn interest. But our policy as a city is to hold 25% of our operating revenue in our reserve account. Right now, we have 60%. So we're tasked with two challenges this year. The first is to make sure that we assess taxes and we adopt a budget that is sustainable over time, and that we can keep our taxes low while still providing the basic and essential services that we want as citizens. So that's task number one. Task number two is to figure out how do we spend the extra money that we have. And that sounds crazy, but I believe that it's my responsibility to either put that money back in your pocket or spend it in a way that you perceive to be a worthy endeavor for our city, something that will set us up for the future and the success of our city and our children. So let's get into the details. I'm going to move my face over a little bit. So let's talk about the beginning. Where do we start? I'm going to start with the millage rates so that we know where we're trying to go. So this tab on this spreadsheet will show us the different millage rate options that we have available to us. This is information that was provided to us by city staff. I simply copied and pasted it into a spreadsheet that I could color code and work with. So as you look at the millage rates, you can see 4.0 is the bottom number that was given to us from the city staff. That would give us an estimated tax collections of $25 million. And you can see how each millage rate change gets us to a different tax number. So the amount that we assess you will dictate the amount that we collect in taxes. There's a few assumptions here. One is that next year's gross taxable value will be $6.3 billion. 4.7 mils, which is 0.0047, would bring us a collected tax rate amount of $29.7 million. I will point out that in 2019, we had an entire operating budget of $31 million. So I think that's something important to keep in mind. Our growth has not doubled since 2019, but our taxes have. That bothers me. It might be okay for some, and that's okay too. What I've done here is I've color-coded the target numbers that I think are particularly important. The current rate is 4.88. Now I want to be extremely clear to you. 4.88 is raising taxes. The property assessor has given us an estimated tax rate of 4.6185. That rate is the point at which we would, as a city, be collecting the same amount in taxes as we did in fiscal year 2025. That's called the rollback rate. Under no circumstance will I ever vote above the rollback rate. I don't even think it's acceptable this year, but that is a very important number. The rollback rate of 4.6185 is keeping taxes the same. The rate proposed by staff, and please don't get upset with them, they're working very hard to make us all happy, but the rate proposed by staff is 4.7. 4.7 is raising taxes. Again, if this does not make sense to you, I do have a video on my YouTube that will explain why that is. But for those of you who have watched all that or are familiar with how taxes and the millage rate work, this year's rollback rate is 4.6185. At 4.6185, we would collect $29,184,000 in taxes. That's important because the original budget that was given to us by staff, with no cuts and the assumption that we would be making cuts, had a collected tax of $28,549,000. Now at $28,549,000, the tax rate should be 4.518. For me, this is the starting point. This is the point at which we give staff everything they think that we need in order to provide the essential services that this city needs. The staff are our professionals, and I believe they know what they're doing. They took a great deal of time to put together a budget that they thought would be satisfactory to not only this council, but our citizens. And the amount that they think they need from you and me, the taxpayer, is $28.549 million. That tax rate is 4.518. I will not vote above the 4.518 on Tuesday night's meeting. Under no circumstance will I do that. In the end, I will not vote above a 4.2. I do believe that our staff and our council continue to work together, and I'll go through that with you in just a moment. But the difference between 4.2, which gets us back to where we started this, in my opinion, and the amount that staff think that they need this year to operate is $2 million. This will make a lot more sense to you as we go through why that number does not concern me in the least. I would actually like to see us roll back the millage as far as 3.9. My rationale for that is that in 2022, when I audited the budget and I went through and looked at all of the numbers and where we should have made cuts in order to keep the city staff operating at the same level of care and commitment and dedication to cutting expenses, was 3.9. We could have been there then, and I think we should be there now. So for me, my target will be 3.9. I don't think we're going to get there this year, but I don't want you to just write it off as not doable, and I'll show you why. I asked our finance director to put together a cash flow adjustment. You can kind of see it here. I can move the screen, but honestly, I can provide it to you if you want it. It's a PDF. But the original request was $29,265,518. And if you look back here, we can see at 4.7, we're at $29,699, which is more than the staff requested. And at the rollback rate of $29,184, we're pretty darn close to the number that staff is looking for at $29,265. So I think that the staff's request, as amended by the workshops that we've had, at $29,265 is a number for us to be starting from and looking at. So I asked him, I said, don't cut anything. Just show me what it would look like from a cash flow perspective. Because one, we're not going to collect $29 million on October 1st. And two, we're not going to be able to spend $71 million on October 1st. It's going to take time to do that. We have hirings, we have consultants, we have general operations, there's construction. There's a lot of things that aren't going to happen on October 1st. So we don't actually need to have all of our money in the bank on October 1st. Now, why is that important? Because the fiscal year is from October 1st until September 30th. So if we need to spend 50% of our money in the last quarter of the year, then that means that we can keep the lower budget at the beginning. So I asked him to do a cash flow analysis. And what you can see is as he went through month by month and he got with the department heads and they figured out realistically, when do I need this money? What ended up happening was the original projected expenses over revenues was $12 million, meaning at 29,265, we have 59 million in revenue from other sources. There's other places that we get money. And then when we look at our expenses, the original projection was that we would spend 71 million, but that's assuming that we can spend it all starting October 1st. And this is a normal process. I've been doing this with staff for the last 4 years. This is not a trick or a game. It's just the normal thing when you're adding expenses. So when we look at the actual cash flow, what we see is that based on the timeline of spending the money, we don't need $12 million from our reserve account on October 1st. What we would need is 10.8. So again, remember, this is going to make more sense for those of you who are fiscally conservative saying, Allison, I can't believe you're talking about spending $10 million over our revenues. Watch and see why, okay? But what I want to do is start at the high level, 12 million versus 10.8. That right there is a $1.2 million difference. And that is not, there's no game here. It's just the way that the cash flows go. So let's talk about why we would even be talking about a $10 million overage. It looks like irresponsible spending. Well, let me show you what's going on. So what we decided to do is look at what we have in our reserves. I'm going to give you, remember how I said at the beginning that we had 60% of our general fund in our reserves, and we need to have 25. The reason why we have that 60% is because over the last 4 years, we didn't actually need to raise the millage. We actually did not need to raise the millage. And what we did was we prepaid as taxpayers into the general fund. But we don't have a purpose for that. So I look at it and say, okay, where didn't we spend money that maybe we should have or could have? You know, we're all still here. So we got through it. So now we have this money sitting in our savings account. What do we want to do with it? Do you want me to vote to give it back to you and just cut your millage almost in half? We can go through that. I'm going to show you what that would look like. Do you want me to spend it? I'm very interested in your feedback, and please give it to me so that I have guidance as I head into Tuesday in the final budget workshop. So I'm going to show you what we've been talking about on how to spend this money. The money is about $16 million that we have to figure out what to do with. So staff gave me a summary of all the expenses that we might have for capital. So these are expenses that are over and above regular operating expenses. It's time to buy a new car. It's time to build a new road. It's time to do something new and fun. The pier, for example, a lot of people have talked about the pier downtown. That would be a capital expense. So these are capital expenses. I've organized them by fund, and I started with the general fund. And then I do have the information on the other funds, but they don't impact the tax rate. So I have them here for you so you can see what kind of projects that we're working on. But the most important one is the general fund. So you're going to see a couple things here. And you'll hear Scott talk about Fund 100 and Fund 320. So the proposal by staff, by Scott Borer, our finance director, and I think it's a good one, is that we take some of our funds that are in the general reserve right now and move them, create a new account called capital projects. If we had a capital projects fund, when the pier downtown came up, we would just say, pay for it out of the capital fund. Don't worry about the Parks and Recreation Fund or having to do a new project. We have a capital fund, pay for it. That's what it's there for. It's there for maintenance of capital projects. So I think it's a good idea, and we certainly have the money to be able to do that. So you see this capital fund, Fund 320. It is a general fund. It's just earmarked for capital projects. So I like it. I'm in support of it. We don't have to do it, but I think it's a good move. The mayor and I have kicked around a shared agreement that we should probably be holding 30% instead of 25%. Scott has suggested that we take 10% and put it in the capital fund, that would give us a 35% reserve, with 10% being towards capital, 25% being towards operations. I think that's wise. And so that's what you're kind of seeing here. So when we look at the general fund, what are the projects that we're seeing? Okay. This one here is, let me make my screen a little bit smaller for you. All right. This one here is the sale of the building across from City Hall. It doesn't really have much of an impact on the budget. This is capital vehicles for police. So you're going to see down low the infrastructure fund. This is really important. This is a major shift, and this is exciting, but it's going to cost us some general fund dollars to fix it. Over time, our city staff and council have chosen to take funds out of the infrastructure fund to do things like parks and recreation, police, and I think that that is not a good idea. I believe that Scott agrees with me, and I think the council generally agrees too. We want to use the infrastructure fund for infrastructure projects, not for parks and recreation and police. Well, one of the big things that's been coming out of the infrastructure fund is our police vehicles every year. So you can see here, originally, we had police vehicles in the infrastructure fund. We have moved those out, and we have split it between the general fund and the police fund. Well, that's a good practice because we actually need new vehicles for new officers, and those can come out of the police impact fee fund. And we need new vehicles for old vehicles that have now reached the end of their useful life. So we can split that up now, and we don't have to take it all out of the infrastructure street fund. So this is a really good practice, and that's what you're seeing is this sheet is the complicated one, and it's the cleanup of the way we've been doing our finances for the last several years. We have Parks and Rec. You see all these Parks and Rec fees in here from the infrastructure fund. We got to stop doing that. Parks and Rec needs to pay for Parks and Rec. Whether it's from impact fees or general fund, we need to not take, my opinion, not take from our streets and sidewalks to build parks and recreation. Now, if that parks and recreation is somehow a street or sidewalk, the string of pearls, for example, would be something that maybe we could talk about using the infrastructure fund because it's actually a transport system that gets you from one side of the city to the other. Okay, that makes sense. But these projects are not transport projects. These are Bishop Field, Lake Felcher, a vehicle for parks and recreations. What do we call the park rangers program? So these need to get out of there. Here's the cool thing. Because we're moving this out and we're not putting this in the infrastructure fund, these funds here, we are actually able to fund a street renovation that we were going to put off for fiscal year 27. This is all coming out of the infrastructure fund, not the general fund. So this is exciting. So this year we're looking at fixing East Avenue and Lakeshore Drive. Fantastic. That's very good. So I'm going to go back up to the general fund. So that's what that line item is. This is just selling that building across the street. It's a $1.3 million. It's actually going to be more like 1.3, but let's call it 1.2 impact on our budget, which is exciting. We removed a couple items from the proposal for capital funds. That's what you're seeing here is we took about 30,000 out for some capital funds that are in the budget worksheets that you can see. Same thing here. We made an adjustment to the cost of training vehicle 101 for the fire department, the actual cost versus projections from 3 months ago. Then we get into, okay, city manager's department. So these are exciting for me, and these are not just expenses. So what you're going to see later is that these personnel services, the economic development director, the grant writer, and PIO, these people are going to actually generate revenue for our city. These are revenue generators. So there's a cost up front, but it pays off in the end. I support this. I think this is a wise move. Since we have the money, let's invest in personnel whose job is to create wealth for our community. So I think that's really important. What you see on my spreadsheet here is that the grant writer and PIO were both put in at about 70,000. That's a mistake because we already have a PIO position. We're just looking to outsource that to a local firm to do social media and consulting for us. So it's really a $75,000 impact on the budget, not 153. Scott hasn't seen this sheet. He's working on the Doge paperwork. So if I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but my intention when I brought this up was to add 75,000, not 153,000. So then we've got additional licenses and certifications, travel and per diem. I think that a good economic development person is going to be going to the Conference for New Urbanism. I think they're going to be going to, I hope they are invited to go to the Urban Guilds Summit. These are award-winning property development groups. So I don't mind putting a little bit extra in the budget. If we had to cut, I would cut here, but I think that they're going to need that. So then when we look at Parks and Recreation, we have the creation of a sports facility manager. It's a $120,000 all-in position. So that's with burden. Burden's about 33% per staff. We're looking to get someone who really knows how to maintain facilities properly, someone with a great background and experience. I like that position. Again, if I had to cut, I'd cut here, but I think that that's an important position. Same thing with Parks and Recreation. We've got additional travel that I think we should be doing, tourism-related travel, National Parks and Recreation Association membership, things like that. I think that that's going to help us have a great Parks and Recreation program. So for me, increasing the budget there is worth it. Again, if we need to sharpen our pencils, part or all of that goes. But I think that that will pay off for our community in the long run. Now, these professional services originally, and I think we need this. This goes to an assessment of all of our parks, including the Performing Arts Center. We increased the budget at the workshop to $250,000. But what I discovered after the fact is that we actually can get grants to help us cover these assessments. There's one currently open. We have until August 1st. Staff has already applied for it from the Florida Department of Commerce, for example. But there are other grant opportunities. So I think we need to offset this with some grants. And if we don't get them, then I think we don't get to do the work. But I think that we can get them. So I think we should go get them. So that's what that adjustment is for me. Now, where I have yellow, you're going to see that as the CRA. I want to talk about that in another video because it's very important and it's a distinction that we haven't been making as a city over time, but the CRA is its own bucket. So downtown Clermont has a different millage rate. So you and I are paying 4 point whatever the number is. Downtown is paying 10. So they have a huge millage rate. And the reason for that is that they have their own bucket of funds from which they can draw for projects. However, we as the general fund have been funding things for the CRA. For example, the comprehensive plan form-based code for the CRA is coming out of the general fund. Bishop Field improvements is coming out of the general fund. Meet Me in the Middle is proposed to come out of the general fund. The Art Walk project is proposed to come out of the general fund. The garage is proposed to come out of the general fund. Not appropriate, folks. That needs to be coming out of the CRA. Now, I'm going to talk about the CRA in depth in another video. I'm not saying we can't do it. I'm saying we need to be smarter about it. The same way that I'm asking for police to start funding their own vehicles, and I'm asking Parks and Rec to not steal from the roadway and the impact fee and the infrastructure fund. Same thing. I want to see the CRA set up for success so that they have more money than they need, and they should be able to do that. And that's why we're investing in the form-based code. I fully support that investment, and I'll talk to you about why I have loan next to it. Not looking for debt. You'll like the idea when you hear it, I think. So when we come back to other funds, just to give you an idea of other things that we're doing. So fire station, you should be pretty up to date on fire. If you're not, I can catch up on that or do another video. Very exciting stuff. Fire stations 2, 5, and we're looking at the Verde Ridge area. So that's fantastic. 6-minute response time, 6-minute response time. Then we get into utility billing came up as a problem. If you recall a couple meetings ago, there was a question about them possibly moving into the building across the street from City Hall. I do not like that idea. They have said, nope, we can do it a different way. And then we workshopped this during the budget season. What we decided to do, rather than put a $1.2 million building towards utility billing, we decided instead to invest in technology and software so that they can handle the volume of calls, do a better job of being available, helping folks kind of work through the phone lines. And we're kicking around the idea of no longer charging credit card fees. Right now, over 50% of our utility bills are collected in checks, which I find to be fascinating. What we think is that people don't want to pay the credit card fee. And what we want to do is incentivize folks to pay by ACH and use their credit cards by not charging fees and by reducing their costs if they pay by ACH. And so that's going to cost us money. but it's not going to cost us $1.2 million. And it will help us keep staffing down. So that we're kicking around that idea. So that's what you're seeing here. Again, this is coming out of the Water and Finance Fund. It's not going to impact your taxes, but it does impact kind of the way we do business. So open for feedback on that. All these reds down here are related to the utility building renovation. I'm thinking they're going to do it at City Hall. We really don't have a plan. So for me, it's kind of marked as let's figure that one out. The other one that we need to figure out is how we can save money on our health insurance. There are a lot of people working on this right now, and there's a lot of wiggle room. Right now, we pay almost $9 million for health insurance for 700 people, which includes our employees and their families. And I'd like to see that really dug into. It's going to take a couple months, so we're not going to have that anytime soon, but I am hoping that that is impacted in the budget. So this sheet is a little messy, but I want to show you where I've summarized it. My summary is not going to make direct sense. I'm kind of going from 20,000 feet to 500 feet back up to 20,000. So I know this is it can be a little difficult to follow, but hopefully some of this at least makes sense. So what I did was I came in and I took the cash flow discussion or page. So you see the cash flow that staff put together with the original request of 29,265.18. And I came over and made a couple adjustments. So I want to see us, if we look at the millage calculations, I want to see us at this number right here. So when we look at this number, I didn't adjust when the money comes in. I just adjusted the total ad valorem taxes. The other adjustments that I made are these. We need to talk about these. One is the original budget does not presume that Lake County is going to give us any money for EMS. I think that is a mistake because I think it is just that they do so, and I think that they will. So I don't want to presume that we need to fund $1.8 million and just put another $1.8 million in the bank when we already have more money than we should have. So what I'd like to do is plan on it, but not execute the EMS until we have an agreement in place with Lake County. That's what I want to do. If that means that we take it out of the budget altogether, knowing that in the policy, when we adopt the budget, that we're working on it and that we want to execute on it when there is an interlocal agreement, what would happen is the interlocal agreement and the budget amendment would come to us at the same time. So I think this is as much a management issue as it is a budget issue. But personally, I share some concerns about the ongoing operating expenses of the transport if we don't have Lake County support. But again, I think it's just that Lake County provide us those funds. So I really don't think we're going to end up where we don't get them, but we don't have them yet. So I want to be fiscally responsible with your money. So this is a point of discussion and decision and strategy. How do we address this? But I put it in the budget because also in the budget are the expenses for the EMS transport. So I want to see those revenues and I want to see them match the expenses. The other thing I put in the budget was revenue from the grant writer. We're hiring a grant writer. He or she is going to make us money. If they don't, they won't be working for us. So I put in a 10 times multiplier on the grant writer. Realistically, folks, this could be 100 times grant multiplier on the grant writer. But I put it in at 10 times because I think that's really conservative for year one, and I think it's doable. And I think if we set those expectations up front with the grant writer, then we'll only get the ones who know they can go get us the money. So I did add additional revenue for that. The other thing that I did was I took out let's see, down here. I came over to my capital projects and I looked at all of these minor adjustments that I made. And I took that out of the capital projects, 4.1 million, knocked it down to 2.3. And then I took out, another thing we need to talk about is one of the items in the capital projects is $3 million for a land purchase downtown to finish out the art walk. I think there's something that we can do here. What I don't want to do is put it in the budget at a $3 million expense with no offsetting revenue. So this could be a public-private partnership. There's a lot we can do here. I'm completely open to this conversation, but I'm not going to support putting it in the budget to just buy the land and let it sit. it must have a project associated with it in order for me to get to yes on it. So I took that out. So when you do that, we're at a net loss of 6.2 million on the year. When I say when you do that, when you adjust the amount of taxes, when you add revenue from the county, you add revenue from the grant writer, when you make some adjustments on your capital projects, and you don't put in an expense that you won't have unless there's an offsetting revenue, when you take those things out, we're at a $6.25 million loss on the year. So I came down here and did a little summary for us, which is what projects would we be funding with this $6.25 million investment? It is a loss on the year, but it is an investment. And then what projects didn't we fund based on this proposal? This is where we start to get into the art of budgeting. You might do this different. My fellow council members might do it different. Scott might do it different. This is my attempt to come up with what I think are the most important projects and see how we can fund those. So based on my estimations here, what we have is a general fund starting balance of $26,307,000. That's coming from the financials from staff. The ending balance takes the starting balance, adds anticipated revenues for the year, over here, and then subtracts the expenses. And then you look at the mandatory reserves, and then you've got the remainder for future projects. I want to make sure that my revenues match my expenses here, because I might have. Nope, I did it right. Okay, good. So mandatory reserves are 16 million. What we've done is we have spent down our overage on the reserves so that we have almost $4 million left over for future projects. What that means is if we wanted to do the De Hoya Art Walk project, we would have the cash in the bank to do it. If we wanted to start Meet Me in the Middle, we would have the cash in the bank to do it. All these other projects are funded based on this proposed budget. That's a lot. It's a lot of projects. So we don't have to do all of them, but we can. And we still have almost $4 million in the bank for future reserves. If we don't do any of these projects, here's what's interesting. Now, this is a little bit of big numbers because I just did high estimations. I did not run another budget assessment on this. I don't think this is realistic, but I did want to give you an idea of what it could look like if we don't fund any of these projects. If we say, we want to tighten our belts, I want to sharpen my pencil, this is what it could look like. So if we actually don't fund these projects, we will end up with a net positive on the year based on the 4.2 millage rate. We would end up increasing our mandatory reserves, and we would have more money in future projects than we have today. So again, I said at the beginning of this video, I'm not comfortable just continuing to add to a general reserve fund. I would want to give that back to you. So this is what's interesting to me. These numbers are based on a 4.2 millage. So if we have 16.2 and you tell me we don't want to do anything else and we don't want any special projects, we don't want any special events, we don't want to do anything with our recreation, we don't want a 6-minute response time. In fact, let's make fire basic life support. We just want to cut it all. Okay, cool. So we've got $16 million. If I come over here and say, look, I got $4 million to get me down to 3.9, 16 million means I can space that out over 4 years. And as we have the growth over time, we'll be healthy. We can cut this millage. We can go dropping that millage way low. I could run that assessment for you. I could get Scott to run that assessment for you if you really wanted. I don't think that's what you really want. I think from what I've heard from the public, what we really want is to see investments in important projects. And that's what we've been doing as a council. We've been putting together what we think you want to see. So again, CRA is all in yellow, another CRA video. This one's long enough. Comprehensive plan, critically important. Economic development director and grant writer. These folks are going to make wealth for our community. I do think these are an investment for us. East Avenue rebuild and Lakeshore Drive rebuild. Those are going to get our numbers up for traffic, and it's going to help Stoney get more grants than he's already getting, and it's going to make our quality of life better on the street. East Avenue has 2 schools on it. Lakeshore Drive is that beautiful drive on the water, obviously. Those are our 2 worst streets in the city. They've been neglected. I think it's time that we put the money into them that they need. A parks-wide assessment. You know, I'm a parks fan. Parks and Recreation, I think we've got a good one. We've got the American Bicycle Association on the hook, and I think we should do that. We've got $1 million dedicated towards parks improvements throughout the city. There's a number of places these would be spread out. Some small projects, 30,000, some big projects, 600,000, 700,000. But it's really spread out throughout the city. And I think that Brian needs that kind of flexibility to be able to make improvements to the parks around the city, lights at the parks, things like that. I already went over the correction to the infrastructure and use policy, talked about utility billing. Oh, public safety and training center. Oh, that one. Any firemen watching this that might have freaked out when I passed over this, I apologize. I didn't mean to scare you. So in the capital projects, you'll see one of the things I took out is the 12th Street training facility. Well, why would Allison do that? Because our state representatives brought home $1 million for South Lake County Public Safety Training Center this year. So what's really exciting is we should be coordinating with the county, same as EMS, to get those funds for a public safety training facility. We already have an interest from Mineola and Groveland just through casual conversations to collaborate and do things together. The county's got the funds. Let's use them. Great news. We don't have to fund improvements for all of South Lake County. So that's why I took that out. Again, not that I don't want it in there, but I think we have a grant that we can grab and that would save us that money so we can do things like the parks improvements. And then EMS transport is included in here. Again, same thing though. We need to have that offsetting grant revenue for it. So what's not included is the De Hoya property art walk project. Again, I want to do it. I don't want to fund it without a plan in place. Meet me in the middle, not included. Talk about CRA in another video. Health insurance cost reduction. I think that's going to be added revenue for us, but we don't have it yet, so I don't want to rely on it. So what I'm proposing is this. This is what I'm proposing. That we do the general fund at 4.2 this year, that we pay down our reserves with these special projects that are over here to get them done. And then we'll still have almost $4 million in the bank for future reserves. I'm assuming that we won't move forward with EMS unless we have the county money to offset it. If that is not the condition, I am still committed to a 6-minute response time. And it might mean that some of these other projects might need to be cut for the time being so that we can get a 6-minute response time. So we'll have to sharpen our pencils. So the places I think we still need to work on are EMS and the health insurance. I think those are the big ones that we need to work on. We continue to fine tune the other areas, but those are too big. We're talking millions of dollars of impact. So those need to be done before September, which is why, even though I am confident without exception that we can be at 4.2 this year, and I will be disappointed if we are not, I am willing to go as high as the original budgeted rate at Tuesday's meeting, but I hope that we can at least knock that down to 4.3, 4.4, something that says, hey, we're committed to getting this millage as close to 4.2 as we can get it. If I have the votes on Tuesday for 4.2 as the max, I will be voting that way. So that's where I'm at today. I hope you have a great day. Thank you for suffering through this very long video, but I believe it will be helpful and I hope it will be helpful. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. My goal is to make sure that you understand it and that I am getting the answers to the questions that you might have. So I welcome them, and I would like as much feedback as possible on this question. Do we spend the money, or do we sharpen our pencils and give the money back to the taxpayers? I'm interested in your feedback on it. I know what I want to do, but you want me to do something different? Let your voice be known. That's why we're here. We're your elected officials. I hope you have a great weekend. I'll see you Tuesday. Thank you.